So I'm going to talk about my leadership progression through my goals and the five things that I felt were valuable and important that I learned from this course. The first thing I wanted to talk about was my goals. My goals were focused around planning and assessment and accountability because those were my areas for functional and growth in relation to the leaks like standards. So my goals basically focused around developing a formative assessment program throughout my courses, and then also understanding how to develop a system to apply differentiation strategies for students, especially for developing student growth. The course I currently am really focused on is Intro to Digital Technology, which is a course I haven't taught before. I'm familiar with the concepts, but I came from a private school to a public school, and we didn't have that course at the school that I used to teach at. And so I've been kind of following along with the teacher, but one of the things that I've really been trying to push is that we use this electronic system for allowing students to complete activities. And it's very much a progress based, completion based thing, but it also has things like quizzes and that kind of stuff built in. But we only use the free version of it. So we don't have access to all the data analysis, progress tracking, all the tools that really make it very robust. We don't have access to. And so one of the things I've been pushing with our administration is the ability to get the full paid version of it so that I can actually utilize those data tools in my classroom. I think it would be make it much more effective for me and for the other teacher if we had access to those tools. The other thing I've been doing is, as we've been going through the course on my lesson plans, I've been coming up with different ideas for differentiation, student choice, some of the things that would make the activities a little bit more understandable maybe to some students than others, because in this course some of the students, or most of my students, thought that they were taking a business and technology course, which they perceived as a much easier course, did not require programming and those types of things, whereas they got pushed into an intro to computer science course because we're ending that business and technology pathway. So they ended up in a course that most of them were not prepared for. And they were expecting a much easier, I guess, kind of course, where it's an easy A versus a course that's a little more rigorous, which is what I deliver to them. So that's something that I've been trying to kind of go along and see is these students that maybe aren't prepared to take an intro CS class, how can I adapt the course to better help them understand the concepts, but maybe adjust the rigor of the assignments to make it a little bit easier for them to be successful while still keeping those students who are high achieving students engaged and active. Because I have had some of my higher achieving students say, yeah, I'm just kind of bored. So that's something that I'm looking at focusing on and trying to improve. And I'm making notes as we go throughout the semester of things that I can do to differentiate and help both groups of those students. In terms of the five things I learned, the first thing that I thought was just kind of interesting was I did not know about the wealth of data that the Georgia Department of Education collects. Again, I came from a private school, and so we never really looked at CCRPI scores and that kind of stuff because it's not tracked for private schools. And so I wasn't familiar with what that score was, what its components were, how it was collected. Didn't really know anything about Georgia milestones or any of those types of things. And so I learned quite a bit just about the wealth of data that's available to public school administrators. And so that was something just interesting to see how all that data stacks up, where it all comes from, how it's all collected. The other points that I thought were of interest were, first of all, the importance of leadership in a data culture. I've been in two different schools, and in both of them, there's pros and cons, but I feel like a lot of times that data can be kind of a lip service thing. They say it's important, but they never demonstrate that it's important. That's something that was a real big takeaway for me, is that as a leader, you have to demonstrate on a regular basis how data is used, how it's analyzed, and why it's important to use. And so there's a number of different ways that leaders can do that. I think in conjunction with that, there's one of the things I kind of was reinforced by was that there is a fear of data a lot of times amongst teachers, and that's down to two other points that I'm going to talk about as other things that I learned. But basically, that there is a fear of kind of a data culture, which there really shouldn't be. But I think it's gotten a bad rap because of how it's been used in the past, especially from a top-down approach from the state and in terms of funding and student performance, all those types of things. So related to that, there's a couple points that I learned about that I think are valuable to understand. The first of all is the importance of professional development and teachers being more comfortable with the use of data. I think that there's a lot of teachers that don't necessarily understand how to use data appropriately, and they get scared by it. It's spreadsheets, it's numbers, and maybe they're a teacher that doesn't understand that stuff. One of the things I found interesting was when I was doing my data culture assignment, I saw that my science department that I interviewed was very comfortable with data because many of them had taken statistics classes and math classes, and they use the tools on a daily basis, Excel and those types of things, to have their students actually work through assignments. So they felt very comfortable with it, and they had good procedures in place for looking at that data. There was room for improvement, but they definitely had done very well with it. So I think getting teachers more accustomed to and understanding and developing them so it's not something that they're afraid of, and they know how to do it effectively and efficiently for their particular subject. The other area related to that, I think, is just a fear of assessment of them. All the things in the news about scores and tied to teacher pay and all this other kind of stuff, I think tends to scare people. And I think this kind of goes back to leadership, but understanding that data is not a tool for evaluation of the individual necessarily all the time, but more that it's a tool for improvement in the classroom. And so that's something that I think that I think it's a leadership thing that can be pushed down, is that I'm using this data to understand how I can better teach my students. Just because students didn't get some content or didn't do well on a particular form of assessment or whatever it happens to be, doesn't mean I'm a bad teacher. It just means that I need to look at how I can better reach those students, help them understand what it is that they need to learn. So those were the 5 things. I apologize, I went a little bit over, but I wanted to be detailed on those. So learned a lot in this class, really enjoyed it. Appreciate it, and I hope you have a great next semester.